Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea will reopen its schools in stages starting May 13th. Until now, because of the coronavirus, students have been taking classes online. Health guidelines will still apply. The South Korean government starts making disaster relief payments to households. The first to get them will be those living on basic pensions and disability. Payments to everyone else will start in the days to come. And consumer inflation in South Korea in April was at the lowest it's been in 6 months, just 0.1%, held down in large part by the plunge in oil prices. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Students in South Korea will return to the classroom starting next week for the first time this year after schools were closed due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Education Minister Yoo Eun-hae announced Monday that the first to go back will be high school seniors on May 13th. They'll be followed a week later by second-year high schoolers, third-year middle schoolers, and first and second graders in elementary school. Kindergartens will reopen on May 20th. The remaining students have start dates on May 27th and June 1st. The Education Ministry, however, still urges students to follow guidelines like hand washing, wiping down desks, and social distancing. The UN Command Military Armistice Commission was scheduled today to send a special team to investigate the gunshots fired on Sunday by North Korea at a South Korean guard post. The team will evaluate whether those shots violate the two Koreas' armistice agreement. At around 7:41 a.m. on Sunday, the North fired 4 gunshots towards a South Korean guard post in the demilitarized zone in Cheolwon County. The South Korean military responded by firing warning shots and broadcasting a warning. Seoul also sent a statement demanding an explanation, but the North has not yet responded. The South Korean military is investigating North Korea's motive, but says it was most likely an accidental misfire. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the denuclearization talks with North Korea will resume now that Kim Jongun is back from an almost 3-week absence. Pompeo also said the shots fired across the DMZ on Sunday by North Korea were likely accidental. Lee Seung-jae reports.
With North Korean leader Kim Jong-un re-emerging into the spotlight for the first time in weeks, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has reaffirmed Washington's stance on denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. Speaking to ABC News This Week on Sunday, Pompeo was asked if he knew what Kim was doing during the period he was laying low. Pompeo responded by saying there wasn't much he could share, and regardless, Washington's mission remains the same, namely to convince the North Koreans to give up their nuclear weapons, to verify the same, and to then create a brighter future for the North Korean people. Pompeo added the mission has been something President Trump has been focused on since he became president, and something Washington will continue to work on. Pompeo was also asked for his take on the multiple shots fired by North Korea across its border with South Korea. Pompeo said he believed the shots were accidental, adding the South Korean side returned fire, but there was no loss of life on either side. The two Koreas exchanged gunfire around a rural guard post on Sunday, raising tensions just a couple of days after North Korean state media showed Kim Jong-un visiting a factory. The report covered Kim's first public appearance since April 11th. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The South Korean government from today is making emergency relief payments to people, starting with the 2.8 million households in the country living off basic pensions or disability payments. Other households will be eligible to apply in the coming days. Kim Hyo-sun has the details.
Some 2.8 million households living off basic pensions or disability payments across South Korea will be receiving emergency disaster relief payments starting Monday. Cash deposit will be wired directly into their bank accounts that they're already using to receive government assistance.
After 5 p.m. on May 4th, you can check whether the payout has been made into the respective bank account you are using to receive your welfare allowance.
Households eligible for these first payments account for about 13% of all households in South Korea. As for the rest of the nation's households, starting from 9 a.m. Korea time on Monday, they can check their household status on the Disaster Relief Fund homepage and start applying from May 11th. To prevent people applying all at once and overloading the system, the government will implement a 5-day rotation system according to the last digit of one's birth year, just like the country rationed the buying of protective face masks. 1 million Korean won, or a little over $800 will be given to 4-person households, while single to 3-person households will receive less. People can apply to receive the payment via their credit or debit cards, which will be given out in the form of card points 2 days after they apply. You can also apply in person even if you are not the head of the household by applying in person at community service centers. Those payments will be made in either prepaid card or regional gift certificates. The money needs to be spent by August 31st, where it will be considered a donation and used to support those who've lost their jobs or have been put on unpaid leave. For those who do not apply, the money will also be considered a donation. Meanwhile, the government warned the public to be extra cautious of voice phishing attempts or scam text messages in relation to the Emergency Relief Fund. The Ministry of the Interior and Safety explained that it does not send out text messages containing URL links, adding that the public needs to delete such messages. Kim Jongun, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news on this Monday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-suk, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you as always for coming on.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks on Wall Street were down sharply on Friday. Concerns that the trade war with China will flare up again. Korean stocks lower today, too, as we come back from the holiday weekend. What's the story in the stock markets?
Okay, well, last week and today, depending on the region, you really had a different result. Now, for Chinese market, it was up last week, and today they're off because they're Labor Day vacation, but they seem to be up because, they seem to be getting over the coronavirus, and because the China-U.S. Conflict flared up at the end of the week, that might not have been reflected in the stock market. The European market, as well as the Japanese market, it did fairly well last week at the beginning, but it did not do so well at the end of the week, though a lot of European markets were closed at the end of last week for their vacations as well, holidays. But that also seems to reflect that at the beginning of last week, things seemed to be turning over with the coronavirus. A lot of European countries were starting to open up. But then at the end of the week, we saw very bad numbers coming from the United States. Now, the United States numbers were bad all last week. Partially toward the end of the week, that was, as you mentioned, it was because of the growing conflict between U.S. and China. But also for the most of last week, people have been commenting a lot that stock prices have maybe grown too quickly in April. April was the fastest month for stock index increase since 1987, and a lot of people are wondering whether the current economic situation justifies that rapid increase. And I think some doubts or some conflicts over that opinion is resulting in stock market fall last week in the United States. Now, Korea, it had a very mixed week, though overall it was positive last week, but as you mentioned, it went down today. I think people were very optimistic about getting away from the self-isolation that was in Korea until the end of last week and opening up starting this week. But again, the very bad economic performance numbers, as well as more fear about the future export numbers, are, I think, dragging down the markets.
Well, Professor Young, consumer prices in Korea last month we see now were up only 0.1% from a year ago. Of course, that's far below the government's target, and the first time it's been below 1% so far this year. What's going on with inflation?
Okay, well, numbers are even worse. The numbers that you cited were over the last 12 months, but if you look at the numbers just from last month, then all of the numbers are in the negative range. The consumer price index fell by 0.6% between last month and this month, and the core inflation rate was 0.3% and 0.1% over the last 12 months. But if you only look at the this month and last month, it was minus 0.2%. And the reason basically is that the demand has collapsed. While we were not in a lockdown situation like Europe and United States, we were in a very self-isolating type of economy. So a lot of services industries suffered. And then we all know about the rapid decrease in exports that we had in March. And in addition, there's a lot of concern over how bad it's going to be, the economy, how bad it's going to be this year. So I think people are refraining from spending. So that lack of demand, I think, is the biggest factor playing into the very low inflation rate.
Well, looking ahead this week, we'll get some figures, international figures from the Bank of Korea. Also, the current National Assembly could meet again before new lawmakers are sworn in. Give us a couple of things you'll be watching this week.
Okay, well, for the current account, we already know the basics of the numbers. The March numbers were actually not that bad compared to April's goods exports and imports, and I think it'll reflect that. The March numbers are going to be not good, but it's going to be not too bad either, but you have to remember that that's an outdated information to an extent. Now, for the foreign statistics, the most interesting statistics which are coming out this week, I think, is the U.S. unemployment rate and the changes in wages. We know that the unemployment rate is going to go up a lot. A lot of people are estimating somewhere in the 18% range, and that will approach the numbers that United States saw during the Great Depression, which was in the 20% range. But it'll be interesting to see what the official numbers are going to be, because we've only seen people who have applied for new unemployment benefits. We haven't really seen any numbers of people who are perhaps going back to jobs or people who have alternate employment. So this will give us perhaps a more accurate figure of what the unemployment situation is like in the U.S. And since the U.S. is de facto acting as the engine of growth for the world now, we'll have to see how bad the coronavirus has hit the U.S. economy and employment.
Indeed. All right, Professor Young, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insights today. Always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, to support South Korea's struggling airlines, the Transport Ministry is going to pre-purchase $1.25 million worth of plane tickets this year for its officials' future travel needs. That amount, the ministry says, will account for 85% of this year's travel expenses. This is the first time a South Korean government ministry has done that, and by next month, the central government and other agencies plan to do the same. If the trips are not taken by the end of the year, the money will be refunded. Industry research suggests that the coronavirus pandemic could cost more than 100 million jobs in travel and tourism worldwide. That's according to a study by the World Travel and Tourism Council, which says nearly 75 million of the at-risk jobs are in G20 countries. 1 million jobs are being lost, it says, every day. The study projects the greatest losses to be in Asia at more than 63 million and in the Americas with some 14 million. The industry itself is projected to lose up to $2.7 trillion. Tomorrow, South Korea celebrates Children's Day. Normally, parents take their kids out to fun places like the zoo and the theater. This year, many of those places are still closed, of course, but some have made special arrangements, like an opera show for children. Kim Jongun reports.
Baby unicorns dance in harmony to entertain kids. They tell the story of Himorino, who drinks a mysterious potion he bought off a con artist. This is a famous opera, The Elixir of Love, adapted for children over 4 years old. This is a live show where kids can interact with the performers. We arranged the seats to be distanced 2 meters apart from each other. Children can learn about opera in a fun and easy way as they sing and dance along with the actors. Hey friends, it must be very boring staying at home due to the coronavirus. Here you can enjoy dancing and singing, so please come and watch Poo Poo Island. Want to learn more about Mozart? The show tells the stories behind operas like The Marriage of Figaro and The Magic Flute, while performers sing beautiful harmonies.
Many children are staying home and are not allowed to go to school. So during this period, I believe our show could provide them with some excitement.
The performance is scheduled for 4 times this year, and Seoul Metropolitan Opera will live stream their show on Children's Day. As well as music, you can also see a private art exhibition by 6-year-old artist Leonardo Pastrana. Unique color combinations and his creative perspective will allow you to get away from your busy life. Familiar movie heroes appear somewhat different at the Robot Art Factory. Iron Man has gained weight, and Robotech on V is fully painted in silver. Exploring art inspired by famous figures will allow parents to share stories with their children. Kim Seong-min, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.